Okay, so I'm Dr. Carolyn White. I'm the Director of Research Ethics and Integrity here at Macquarie University, and we're going to talk about research ethics and integrity for high degree research students here at Macquarie. So research ethics and integrity, basically we're here to support all staff and students at the university and to help you comply with your research responsibilities and to maintain the highest standards of research ethics and integrity. So integrity at Macquarie aims to promote and support responsible research practices by providing resources and guidance to researchers and trainee researchers. Human ethics, we have a couple of ethics committees here, and all research with human participants has to adhere to the National Statement on Ethical Conduct in Human Research, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And finally, we have animal ethics. We have an animal ethics committee here at Macquarie, and we're strongly committed to supporting the care and welfare of animals and the ethical conduct of people who work with animals for scientific research purposes. So firstly, we're going to talk about research integrity and the responsible conduct of research and ethics, and we're going to have a look at the documents that are really important. So in terms of research integrity or the responsible conduct of research, we have two central documents that set out the principles and practices of good research. One is the Australian Code for the Responsible Conduct of Research, which was updated in 2018. And then we have the Macquarie University Code for the Responsible Conduct of Research, which mirrors the Australian Code. In terms of research ethics, the document that we use for regulating human ethics is the National Statement on the Ethical Conduct of Human Research, again updated in 2018. And for animal research, we have the Australian Code for the Care and Use of Animals for Scientific Purposes. And it's your responsibility to be familiar with these documents, particularly the Australian Code and the Macquarie University Code. But if you're involved in human research, then the National Statement, or animal research, then the Australian Code for the Care and Use of Animals for Scientific Purposes. So firstly, we're going to talk about research integrity and the standards of conduct. We're going to have a look at the documents and what the various codes say, the principles and responsibilities, and we're going to have a look at a couple of examples. So what is research integrity? Basically, it is the trustworthiness of research due to the soundness of its methods and the honesty and accuracy of its presentation. And research integrity applies to research that is conducted across all disciplines. So the Macquarie University Research Code is taken from the Australian Code for the Responsible Conduct of Research. As I said, was revised in 2018. And basically we've mirrored the Australian Code. There are 8 broad principles, and these characterise the honest, ethical and conscientious research culture. That's very important here at Macquarie University. It also sets out expectations for the conduct of research in Australia or research conducted under the auspices of Australian institutions. And all researchers need to be familiar with the Macquarie Research Code and to apply the principles and responsibilities to their research to fulfil their responsibilities as research trainees. So reading this document is your responsibility. So what are the 8 principles that are outlined both in the Macquarie University Code and in the Australian Code? Well, the principles include honesty in developing, undertaking and reporting of your research, the rigour in developing, undertaking and again reporting research, transparency in declaring interests and reporting research methodology, data and findings, fairness in the treatments of others, that's both in terms of your research colleagues, but also your participants if you have research participants, respect for them as well, for the wider community, for the animals and for the environment. It's very important to recognise the rights of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to be engaged in research that affects or is of particular significance to that group of people. Accountability for the development and undertaking and the reporting of research, and of course promotion of responsible research practices. So in this colour wheel, you can see the responsibilities mapped onto the 8 principles. And in the Australian Code, there are 13 responsibilities for institution and 16 researcher responsibilities. And some of these responsibilities are general or shared, some relate to specific research stages, and some relate specifically to ethics requirements. And we're going to have a look at a couple of these. So the 2 of the general or shared responsibilities, so an institutional responsibility 4 is to provide ongoing training and education to promote and support responsible research conduct for all researchers and research trainees and for those involved in other relevant roles. And the concomitant researcher responsibility, R16, is to uptake and promote education and training in the responsible conduct of research. So it's the institution's responsibility to ensure that there is available ongoing training and education, and it's your responsibility to ensure that you take this opportunity up and then promote responsible research conduct. So some specific examples. It's important to retain clear, accurate, secure and complete records of all research, including research data and primary materials. So where possible, also allow access and reference to these by other interested parties, specifically other researchers. We must ensure that authors of research outputs are all those, but only those, who have made a significant intellectual or scholarly contribution to the research and its output, and that they also agree to be listed as an author. We must also ensure that the ethical principles of research merit and integrity, justice, beneficence and respect are applied to human research as set out in the National Statement on the Ethical Conduct in Human Research. And we'll unpack that and look at the National Statement in more detail a little bit later. So here's just an example, or a picture, of the guides and standards to help you meet your responsibility. So we have standards about the management of data and materials, publication, authorship, peer review, collaborative research, how to handle conflicts of interest, and then managing and supervising research trainees. And there are changes to these standards and guides coming out in the following year. So we're just going to spend a little bit of time thinking about the management of data and materials. This is very important for you to get a good handle on in terms of undertaking your research right at the beginning. So the code says that we must retain clear, accurate, secure and complete records of all research, including data and primary materials as appropriate for the discipline. And where possible and appropriate, allow access to these by interested parties. Now, it's important to enhance data security and to reduce risk. It's also important in terms of research integrity, so that we can increase reducibility and transparency and avoid or respond to scrutiny or accusations of poor research. So the better the records, the better able you are to respond to any criticisms. And increasingly, funding bodies and publishers request data management plans. These have to be developed early in the research, and they must cover plans for storing and preserving data in the short and long term, for sharing some or all data products to the public and to other researchers. And the National Statement on the Ethical Conduct in Human Research requires detailed management plans, and human research ethics committees will be looking at your data management plans to make sure that they meet the requirements of the National Statement. Again, new standards are being released this year. So one of the main issues for research trainees is the vexed issue of authorship. What counts as being an author? How do you share it? What are the rules around authorship? So, a bit of information for you. To be listed as an author, a person must make a substantial contribution to one or a combination of the following. So, conceiving or designing the project, Getting data where this has involved significant intellectual judgment, planning, design or input. Contributing knowledge where justified, including Indigenous knowledge. Analysing and interpreting the data, or writing or critically revising the intellectual content of the output. And all authors must give final agreement to the version to be published. But obtaining or providing the funding, collecting data, giving technical assistance or providing materials does not automatically count as authorship. And people who don't qualify as authors, given the above, should be acknowledged in any publication. So where the wheels fall off in terms of research integrity, that's called breaches of the code or research misconduct. And Macquarie University has a procedure for managing complaints, breaches, and how we investigate these. And this document provides detailed processes for managing these and the investigation of complaints about research misconduct. So as you can see from the diagram, a breach is the failure to meet the principles and responsibilities of the Australian Code and the Macquarie University Research Code. Now these occur on a spectrum from more minor to more serious breaches. More serious breaches are often termed research misconduct, and this is defined as a serious breach of the Macquarie University Code, which is also intentional or reckless or negligent. To help you navigate research integrity and the responsible conduct of research and breaches of the various codes, we have research integrity advisors. Now these are people that you can go to and discuss any issues that you have in terms of your research. And at Macquarie University, research integrity advisors are the Associate Deans of High Degree Research and Associate Deans of Research. These are very experienced researchers and leaders in their research field who have empathy and knowledge of the institution's policies, structure and procedures, and have sound knowledge of the Macquarie University Code for the responsible conduct of research. And they can provide advice about good research practice and about reporting any breaches of the code. So if you have any concerns at all, it's important that you talk to a research integrity advisor. You may choose to speak to someone in your faculty, or if it's a bit close, you're welcome to speak to any of the research integrity advisors, and these are, we have research integrity advisors in each of the faculties. You can talk in hypotheticals if you wish, rather than naming names, and you can get their advice and help in preparing a complaint if that's the most appropriate thing to do. We can't stress enough the importance of having conversations with your supervisors. So you need to discuss and plan your data management in consultation with your supervisor. Make sure you understand things like plagiarism and how to cite correctly. Talk about and plan authorship, and it's really important that you keep records of these discussions. You can discuss any potential or perceived conflicts of interest and how to manage them. You must meet regularly with your supervisor, and if things aren't going so well, raise it with a supervisor or a mentor. Now, where you can get more information is on the following slide. So it's information about research integrity advisors, the code, research integrity at Macquarie, and then myself and Dr. Shannon Smith, who's the Research Integrity Officer. I now want to touch on human research ethics in the next little bit of the talk. So ethics is indeed, so research ethics is indeed a balancing act. So the ethical and responsible research has at its core the judicious balancing of benefits against any risks or potential harms. So on the one hand, we have advancement of knowledge and the attainment of potentially significant social and individual benefits, which must be balanced against the protection of vulnerable parties, society and the environment. And ethics committees do this balancing act when they evaluate your research. So human ethics in Australia is guided, as we've already spoken about, by the National Statement on Ethical Conduct in Human Research. And this is a set of guidelines which all ethics committees use to evaluate research, and research that is ethically sound is research that meets the requirements of the National Statement. Now, this mandates that institutions conducting human research must have a review and approval of a fully constituted Human Research Ethics Committees, or HREC, before research can begin. And as I've already stated, HRECs base their decisions on these guidelines, which can be found at the following web address. So when do you need ethics review? You need to submit an ethics application wherever research is conducted with human participants, with data about people and or tissue. So that includes undergoing psychological, physiological or medical testing and treatment, taking part in surveys, interviews or focus groups, being observed by researchers, for example in action research, the collection and use of people's organs, tissues or fluids, skin, blood, urine, saliva, hair, bones, tumour and other specimens, and their exhaled breath. Research ethics approval is also needed for researchers who have access to participants' personal documents and other materials, such as part of an existing published or unpublished source or database. So if you're conducting research with people, and if it involves any of the list above, then you need to submit an ethics approval, and the approval letter must be appended to your thesis, otherwise it won't go through to examination. So we have responsibilities to the people who are involved or participants in our research. And applications are reviewed against 4 central or core principles. These are research merit and integrity. That means that the research is justifiable and appropriate. Justice, in terms of fair recruitment and to the access to the benefits of research. Beneficence, the benefit of the research must justify the risks. And respect for human beings, respect for their autonomy, and this is evidenced in the information and consent form. So the information you provide to people which allows them to choose whether they want to participate in your research or not. So responsibility for the ethical design, review and conduct of human research is exercised at many levels. So researchers are responsible for the design, review and conduct of research. HRECs and other ethics review bodies who approve the research are also responsible. Institutions, in terms of having good education about the need for ethics review and the fact that they resource human research ethics committees to review research that's carried out under their auspices. Funding organisations have an input, and indeed are the responsible responsible bodies who promulgate the principles that we are required to abide by, agencies that set these standards, and governments. So what are human research ethics committees? Who sits on them? All ethics committees have to have a chair. They have to have lay members, that's a layman and a lay woman. They have to have someone who has experience in professional care, in pastoral care. They have to have a lawyer, and they have to have researchers with current research experience. There should be equal numbers of men and women, and at least 1/3 must be external to the institution. This is required to ensure that we have experience in terms of research that's carried out, and that there is a community input into approving research in Australia. So there are several forms that you can use. So if you're undertaking humanities and social science research, there is a particular form, and another form if you undertake medical or health research. And you can find this information in this diagram, this flowchart, but also on the website. And you can get more information. So here's a link to the national statement. There's information on the website about ethics at Macquarie University. And these are the people that you can contact to help in terms of ethics approval. And finally, we're going to speak about animal ethics. So all research involving animals in Australia must be guided by the Australian Code for the Care and Use of Animals for Scientific Purposes. And this promotes the ethical, humane and responsible care and use of these animals. It provides an ethical framework and governing principles with guidance for researchers, investigators, for teachers, for institutions, for animal ethics committees, and for all people involved in the care and use of animals for scientific purposes. And you can find this document at the following link. So we have responsibilities to the use of animals in our research. So all work with animals must be approved by an Animal Ethics Committees, or AEC. And you'll need to justify your research according to the 3 Rs. Now these principles are replacement. So are there methods that you can use to avoid or replace animals in your research? Reduction, you need to outline how you can introduce methods to minimise the number of animals used in your research. And the third is refinement. What are the methods that you can use to minimise the pain, suffering, distress or lasting harm in your non-human research participants? So those who need animal ethics approval are those who are working with live vertebrate animals, working with cephalopods, wildlife, and also collaborating with other institutions on animal research. You therefore need animal ethics. And this includes the use of animals in research, teaching, field trials, product testing, diagnosis, and the production of biological products and environmental studies. Observational studies of wildlife also require AEC approval. In order to assist you, we have race training. So this is research, animal care and ethics. And at Macquarie University, everyone who performs animal-based research must be listed on a Macquarie University AEC protocol. And all Macquarie University employees and students must complete race training, no matter their level of expertise. And a researcher will not be added to an animal research authority. That's the document that lists what your research is, what you're going to do to the animals, unless the training is done. You cannot conduct your research without AEC approval, and you cannot conduct your research without an ARA, an Animal Research Authority, being promulgated. And to undertake the training, you need to self-enrol in modules 1 to 4 via iLearn. So log into iLearn, search for race training and self-enrol. And this applies to all people undertaking animal research here. You can get more information. So we have links to the Australian Code, information about the Animal Ethics Committee, and the people you can contact. So we have the Secretary and Team Leader to the Animal Ethics Committee and the Animal Welfare Officer who's responsible for all animals on campus. So to finish, we have some take-home messages. Be familiar with the Macquarie University Research Code, the National Statement, and the Animal Code, and relevant policies, regulations and legislation that govern your research. Work closely with your supervisor to complete any ethics applications that are required. Engage in continuous reflection on the values implicit in academia and specific to your research. It's also good to be aware of any pressures you are likely to face and to manage your time and to use the university's resources to limit these pressures. And then, of course, it's always important to seek advice and to find help. Thank you.